Hi guys, welcome to my channel. My name is Favor. For those of you that are new here, I'm currently a master's student undertaking an LLM program in the University of Glasgow in Scotland in the United Kingdom. As you can see from today's title, I'm going to be talking about my struggle with imposter syndrome and how I overcame it, or how I am overcoming it. If you'd like to know more about this topic, definitely keep watching. Before I go into today's topic, I'm going to start off with defining what imposter syndrome is and giving a clear background about my story, and from there begin to draw pointers to help with the discussion today. The imposter syndrome is a psychological occurrence where one doubts their accomplishments, doubts their talents, their skills, or their achievements, and they have an internalized feeling that they would someday be exposed as a fraud. So the imposter syndrome is simply put self-doubt. A person is doubting that perhaps, just maybe, they are a fraud after all, and the degrees that they have or the results that they have was not really gotten by them. And then there's this, let me just give a disclaimer, this may not be applicable for everybody, because you may be there thinking, what is this person talking about? So if you are in that category, you may just do well not to continue with the video. But if you're somebody who can relate a little bit to what I'm saying, then you should definitely keep watching. By the grace of God, I've always been a bright student. When you count the first top 10 students, if I'm not part of the top 10, I'm usually like very close to the 3. Most times I'm leading the class and leading the pack. However, I've had imposter syndrome subtly while I was growing up, from primary, secondary down to the university, but it didn't really manifest much until I was at the Nigerian Law School and when I finished the Nigerian Law School. So every time I get to a new level, let me put it that way, there's always this fear that, or not just fear, but pressure that, you have to outdo your past, you have to constantly prove that you are able to, achieve the results that you had before you got to the new level. So it's a subtle pressure to just always outdo what you've previously done. So the Nigerian Law School is a 1-year program. It should span for 1 year, and it's a program after which you become qualified or eligible to become a barrister and solicitor of the Supreme Court of Nigeria. So at the Nigerian Law School, you're going to take one exam. It's called the bar finals, and then when you take the bar finals, if you do pass, you're going to become a barrister and solicitor. That is, you're going to be eligible to practice as a lawyer in Nigeria. Having graduated from the university with a first-class degree and as the best students, the pressure was massive. And at the Nigerian Law School, the results is categorized into first class, second class upper, second class lower, pass, and I'm not sure if I got the order right. I think there's a third class, and then there's pass, and then there's fail. And so when I finished from the university and I was moving on to the law school, the pressure was so much. My desire to even make a first class at the law school was not based on it wasn't even more of my desire, it was more of what people expected from me. In fact, sometimes I'm walking and everybody's like, you're definitely going to make a first class. And I know some people mean well by saying it, but somehow it was mounting up pressure in my mind. It was mounting up pressure so much in me that when I was even studying for my bar finals, it was not as much as studying to pass the exams. It was as much as studying to prove that I wasn't a fraud, to prove that, because people say if you finish with a first class in university, you necessarily have to finish with a first class from the Nigerian Law School to sort of validate the first class that you made at the university. So the pressure was a lot, I must say. We had to go through the Nigerian Law School for 2 years due to COVID. So we spent 2 years at the Nigerian Law School due to COVID, and it was more intense than I expected. We didn't even go through the normal procedure that people go through. We ended up teaching ourselves for 2 years, and we spent just 4 months in total in the Nigerian Law School, and we taught ourselves basically, and then we had to take the exams. I remember in my first exam, I think I shared it on my Instagram. I shared on my first day of the exams, I was shaking, I was shivering, I didn't eat before going for the exams. And that was the first exam I was ever scared. I was scared I was going to fail. And it was so strange because that's not me. I'm used to scaling through exams, but to tell you how intense the exam was, I was really scared I was going to fail my bar finals. And eventually, when the exams were over, I was so glad the exams were over, beyond even whatever the grade was. I was just glad to be done with this. And then when the results came out, I made a 2-1, and I was very grateful. I was glad I didn't have to go through the exam and go through the process again. But yet it was not the imposter syndrome. The imposter syndrome was saying, look at it, after all. This is the fraud in you is actually coming to limelight. And what also made it worse was when I now left, a lot of people just assumed I made the first class again from the Nigerian Law School. Some people are just going to be finding out through this video that I did not make a first class at the Nigerian Law School. It got worse because when I started working at a leading commercial law firm in Lagos, it was always like, oh, this girl, she finished with the first class, and then most of the first task that I had to do at my firm, then they would say, oh, she finished with the first class, and then they put your touch of first class on the job. And I'm like, I don't know anything about this. I do not know anything about corporate practice. I do not know anything about commercial practice. How do you just assume that, okay, because I narrowly, by the grace of God, made the first class at the university, narrowly made a 2-1 by the grace of God at the law school, would just somehow have an idea of what is required in this aspect of practice. People have so many expectations, and the society has standard of what is termed excellence. The society has standard of what is termed sustaining excellence, and people's expectations and the society's standards coupled with self-doubt is capable of destroying anybody. And so these 3 factors mount a huge pressure on individuals. And here's where I'm going to state the first step that I considered in overcoming the imposter syndrome. The first step is you need to know your true worth. Know that your worth is not in your accomplishments, it's not in your results, it's not in your grades, it's not in the expectations that people have of you. Your worth ultimately as a child of God comes from who God says that you are. So even if you finish with a pass from the university, or you finish with a first class from the university, or if you're the brightest students of your class, or you're the least students in your class, it doesn't affect your worth or your identity in God. You are who God says you are, regardless, not what society defines. The second point I'm going to state is acknowledge that God is your source. For me, this was something that I eventually had to fall back to. Like David said, the God of the lion, the God of the bear would help him to defeat Goliath. So as you keep rising on in life, as you keep proceeding on to the next stages and next levels in life, maybe you're moving from primary school to secondary, or high school, you're moving from high school to university, or wherever it is that you're moving on to the next phase of your career. Do not, even though it's a Goliath, so to speak, it's a huge and a massive task, you need to believe that the God of the lion and the God of the bear is still your God, and he will help you to defeat the Goliath. So past victories, rather than seeing past victories as something that mounts pressure on you, let past victories help you acknowledge that the God who saw you through those seasons is also going to see you through this new season. So God who has seen you through high school will see you through university, is also going to see you through the law school if you're like me and you're heading to the law school, and is also going to see you through your phases in life in your different aspects of career. So acknowledge that God is your source and not your own academic abilities or your potentials or anything else. I mean, you could have a terrible grade and still excel in life. So God ultimately is your source and not your achievements or accomplishments. And this is a factor that you constantly have to bring to remembrance. You also need to beware of false humility. The other extreme end of imposter syndrome, I would say, is like false humility, where you're so complacent and you're even unwilling to take any step whatsoever because you're afraid that, oh, what if I fail? You need to also be wary of this, so you're not falling onto the other end of false humility, where you're not taking steps and you're not pushing yourself to go the extra mile. You're not pushing yourself to do more or to be better because you're afraid of failure. It's always going to be 50-50. You're either going to fail or you're going to excel. So why not try and excel than thinking you would fail and not do it at all? I don't know if that makes sense. So don't let self-doubt lead to self-sabotage, where you do not even take any steps whatsoever. You have wins, celebrate them. Don't let the next phase scare you from celebrating your present wins. So live in the moment. That's my next point. You need to live in the moment. So when you finish with a first class in the university, don't let the fear of law school not allow you to celebrate that particular win. live in the moment. The next point, be thankful to God, be grateful to God. So living in the moments would help you to celebrate your wins and also to be thankful to God for where you are, for the gifts that He has given you, for the graces that He has bestowed upon you, and for the current wins and the prizes and the victories that you have. So learn to celebrate your wins. Post on LinkedIn. So even if you didn't finish with a first class, don't be afraid to celebrate your wins because you didn't do as much as you thought you would have done, or don't let it hold you back from acknowledging that God has actually done something big. Next point I'm going to say is prepare for your wins as well. So while you celebrate your wins on one hand, you also need to double up on your preparation. Now definitely the pressure is going to be there, but you know that you're not defined by the world standard or by society's standard or people's expectations. Nonetheless, you still have to prepare. So you need to put in a lot of effort. You need to put in more efforts than you probably would have loved to put, but this time around you're not putting it from a place of trying to defend your honor or trying to prove that you're not a fraud. You're putting it just because you want to be better. You're putting it just because you want to maximize the best of your abilities. So having this frame of mind will help you to prepare and work harder. So if you have an exam to take after your previous win, you're working harder not to disprove that you're a fraud, but you're working to maximize the best of the best of the best of your ability. Take opportunities that come your way, apply for them. When you see certain openings, don't be afraid that will they take me, even though you qualify and you're scared that is this somebody like you that they're looking for. Take opportunities that come your way, apply for the opportunities and prepare. Put in your actual best. Be confident. That's another point. And the final point, be confident, knowing that, like I said earlier, the God of the lion and the God of the bear is your God, and it's the same God who will see you to defeat Goliath. And know what works for you. So David's story is very, very, very important in this regard. I mean, when Saul gave him a new armor, he didn't take on the new armor. He knew what works for him. So don't, in a bid to defend your honor, take up methods or practices that is not you. Maybe start reading in a method that you ordinarily won't use to read, but just because you're trying to outdo yourself, so you start to, maybe you would ordinarily read for 6 hours, but because you're trying to prove to everybody that you're not a fraud, you're now reading for 18 hours and overstretching yourself. This time around, you may eventually just burn up, and that might even be worse off, and you might even just get results that will be completely not what you would have planned for or expect. Stick to what works for you. Consistency plus the grace of God will always be unmatched. With this, we have come to the end of today's video. I hope you learned one or two things. I hope you learned that imposter syndrome is not the end in itself. I hope you're like me, you're able to take up all of these steps and just pursue that excellence that God has called you to do. Remember that you're not defined by your accomplishments, you're not defined by your achievements, you're not defined by your results. You are who God says you are, regardless of your results. Thank you so much. Until next time, I'll see you in the next one.